Imagine waking up after what should have been a perfect night's sleep. 8 hours, maybe 9, and feeling like you've been carrying invisible weights through your dreams. Your body is rested, but something deeper remains exhausted. You drag yourself to the mirror and see eyes that look tired in a way that has nothing to do with sleep. There's a heaviness there, a kind of weariness that seems to seep from somewhere behind your rib cage, spreading through your chest like smoke. You check your phone. Your life looks good on paper. Stable job, decent relationships, no major crises. People tell you you're lucky. Your blood work comes back normal. Your doctor nods and suggests more vitamins, maybe some exercise. But you know this isn't about your body. This is something else entirely, something that makes you feel like you're living underwater, moving through thick air, existing but not quite alive. Here's what's terrifying. You can't name it. You can't point to a single thing and say, that's why I feel this way. There's no tragedy to blame, no obvious burden to set down. Just this persistent, gnawing exhaustion that follows you everywhere, whispering that something is fundamentally wrong, but never telling you what. You've tried everything. More sleep, less sleep, different jobs, new routines. You've reorganized your life, decluttered your space, downloaded meditation apps, bought self-help books. You've pushed through it, ignored it, medicated it, numbed it. But it remains, patient and persistent, like a shadow that grows longer as the day wears on. And here's the most unsettling part. You're not alone. Look around carefully. Really look, and you'll see it in others too. That same glazed look in the grocery store checkout line. The forced brightness in office conversations. The way people scroll endlessly through their phones, searching for something they can't name. Everyone moving, everyone busy, everyone tired in a way that sleep can't fix. What if I told you that this exhaustion isn't a personal failing? What if it's not laziness, depression, or weakness, but something far more profound, a signal from the deepest part of yourself, screaming to be heard? What if this tiredness is actually your soul's desperate attempt to get your attention, to pull you back from a life that looks right from the outside but feels wrong from within? Carl Jung, the brilliant Swiss psychiatrist who dared to map the hidden territories of the human psyche, identified this phenomenon over a century ago. He saw something that modern society has forgotten. There are two kinds of tiredness. The first is simple, honest fatigue. The kind you get from physical labor, from staying up too late, from pushing your body to its limits. This tiredness has a purpose, a clear cause, and a simple cure: rest. But the second kind of tiredness is far more sinister. It's the exhaustion that comes from living a life that isn't truly yours. The bone-deep weariness that accumulates when you spend your days performing a version of yourself that others expect, approve of, and reward, while your authentic self slowly suffocates beneath layers of social conditioning and survival strategies. This is the tiredness that no amount of sleep can heal, because it's not your body that's tired, it's your soul. And your soul doesn't need rest. It needs truth. It needs alignment. It needs you to stop betraying it in 1,000 small ways every single day. You see, somewhere along the way, you learned that being yourself wasn't safe. Maybe it was too emotional, too inconvenient, too much trouble for the adults around you. So you adapted. You learned to smile when you wanted to scream, to say yes when every fiber of your being wanted to say no, to be strong when you desperately needed to fall apart. You became very, very good at being what others needed you to be. But here's what no one told you. Every time you abandon yourself to keep the peace, to fit in, to be loved, you create a small wound in your psyche. And over time, these wounds compound, creating an exhaustion so deep that it feels like you're drowning in your own life. The question that will haunt you, the one that Jung himself grappled with, is this: how long can you keep living as a stranger to yourself before something inside you breaks? And when it finally does break, because it will you recognize it as the beginning of your liberation, or will you mistake it for the end? If you've ever felt this kind of invisible exhaustion, where your soul feels heavier than your body, like this video, because most people won't say this out loud, but here we do. And if you've ever caught yourself thinking, "I'm so tired of being tired," subscribe, because you're not alone in this, and you're not broken. You're just carrying more than you realize. What's coming next will show you exactly what that weight is, and more importantly, how to finally put it down. To understand why you feel this way, we must venture into territory that modern psychology often avoids. The realm where individual suffering meets collective madness, where personal exhaustion reveals itself as a symptom of something far more sinister happening to our entire species. Jung called it the persona, the mask you wear to navigate society. But this wasn't just academic theory for him, it was a warning. He watched as entire civilizations built themselves on the premise that human beings should suppress their authentic nature in service of social order. He saw how this created what he termed the collective neurosis. Whole populations walking around as strangers to themselves, wondering why nothing felt real anymore. Think about it. From the moment you could speak, you were being trained. Not educated, trained. Trained to sit still when your body wanted to move. Trained to be quiet when your spirit wanted to roar. Trained to compete when your heart wanted to collaborate. Trained to consume when your soul craved to create. You were systematically conditioned to distrust your own instincts and replace them with the preferences of people who barely knew you. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre understood this trap intimately. He wrote about bad faith, the unconscious decision to live as if you have no choice, as if your life is happening to you rather than being created by you. You wake up, go to work, come home, sleep, repeat, not because you chose this rhythm, but because it chose you. You've become what Sartre called a being for others, existing primarily to fulfill external expectations while your authentic self withers in the shadows. But Jung went deeper than Sartre. He recognized that this wasn't just philosophical. It was psychological warfare being waged against the human soul. Every time you smile when you want to cry, every time you agree when you want to argue, every time you perform enthusiasm for things that bore you to death, you're committing what he called self-betrayal, and your psyche keeps score. Here's what's truly disturbing. This system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed. A population of exhausted, disconnected people is easier to manage than a population of authentic, energized individuals who trust their own judgment. Tired people don't revolutionize. They don't ask uncomfortable questions. They don't demand that life be meaningful. They just comply. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration camps and emerged to write about humanity's deepest drive, identified what he called the existential vacuum, the emptiness that occurs when people lose connection to meaning. But what Frankl perhaps didn't fully articulate is how systematically modern society creates this vacuum. We're not just accidentally meaningless, we're being deliberately disconnected from the sources of authentic meaning. Jung discovered something that would revolutionize our understanding of human suffering. The unconscious doesn't just store forgotten memories, it stores the abandoned self. Every authentic impulse you've suppressed, every truth you've swallowed to keep the peace, every dream you've sacrificed for security, it all lives in what he called the shadow. And the shadow grows stronger the more you ignore it. But here's where it gets truly frightening. The shadow doesn't just contain your individual repressions. It contains the collective repressions of your family, your culture, your entire civilization. You're not just carrying your own unfulfilled dreams, you're carrying the unlived lives of generations who also chose safety over authenticity, who also traded their souls for social acceptance. This is why the tiredness feels so ancient, so vast, so impossible to shake. You're not just tired from your own life, you're tired from lives never lived, dreams never pursued, truths never spoken. You're carrying the accumulated exhaustion of a species that forgot how to be itself. And the most insidious part? You've been convinced that this is normal, that feeling disconnected from your own life is just part of growing up, that the ache in your chest when you look in the mirror is simply the price of responsibility, that the voice inside you whispering, "This isn't me," is just immaturity that needs to be silenced. But Jung knew better. He understood that this voice isn't your enemy. It's your salvation. It's the part of you that refuses to die, no matter how deeply you bury it. And it's getting louder because time is running out. What you don't realize is that this disconnection from your authentic self doesn't just make you tired. It rewrites your entire reality. Your brain, desperate to make sense of the contradiction between who you are and who you're pretending to be, begins to construct elaborate justifications for why you feel empty, despite having everything you're supposed to want. This is where the real horror begins. Not in the exhaustion itself, but in how your mind adapts to it. Psychologists call it cognitive dissonance reduction, the unconscious process by which your brain resolves the tension between conflicting beliefs. When your authentic self screams that something is wrong while your rational mind insists everything is fine, your psyche has to choose which voice to believe. Guess which one usually wins? The rational mind, backed by social validation and survival instincts, systematically silences the authentic voice. And once that voice is silenced, something terrifying happens. You begin to lose the capacity to recognize what's real and what's performance, even in your own experience. You start believing your own lies. You convince yourself that you actually enjoy the job that drains your soul. You tell yourself that the relationships requiring you to be someone else are normal. You develop what Jung called psychological inflation, the unconscious identification with your persona until you genuinely forget there was ever anything underneath it. But your body remembers what your mind has forgotten. This is where the invisible consequences begin to manifest in ways that seem unrelated to your psychological state. Your immune system, constantly stressed from the internal war between authenticity and performance, begins to falter. You catch every cold, every flu. You develop mysterious aches and pains that doctors can't explain. Your digestion becomes erratic. Your sleep patterns deteriorate despite your exhaustion. What's happening is that your nervous system is stuck in a state of chronic hypervigilance, not because you're in physical danger, but because you're living in psychological danger every moment of every day. The danger of being discovered as a fraud. The danger of disappointing people. The danger of not being enough. Your fight or flight system never gets to rest because the threat is internal and constant. Neuroscientists have discovered something profound about this state. When you're chronically disconnected from your authentic self, your brain literally begins to atrophy in the regions responsible for self-awareness, emotional regulation, and creative thinking. The prefrontal cortex, which houses your capacity for genuine choice and self-reflection, becomes less active. Meanwhile, the limbic system, responsible for survival and fear responses, becomes hyperactive. You're literally becoming less capable of being yourself the longer you live as someone else. Your brain is physically restructuring itself to support the persona while abandoning the authentic self. This isn't metaphorical. It's measurable, observable, scientific fact. But the consequences extend far beyond your individual experience. Jung understood that when enough individuals become disconnected from their authentic selves, entire societies begin to exhibit symptoms of collective psychosis. Look around. Does the world seem sane to you right now? The most tragic consequence of all is that you begin to pass this disconnection on to others. You model for your children that authentic emotions are inconvenient. You teach your friends that vulnerability is weakness. You show your colleagues that creativity should be sacrificed for productivity. You become an unconscious agent of the same system that crushed your own spirit. And the cycle continues. Generation after generation of souls learning to betray themselves, teaching the next generation to do the same, creating a world where authenticity becomes increasingly rare and exhaustion becomes increasingly normal. But what you don't realize, what Jung desperately wanted you to understand, is that this breakdown you're experiencing isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning. Because the exhaustion you feel, the emptiness, the sense that something is fundamentally wrong, it's not a bug in the system, it's a feature. It's your authentic self's last-ditch effort to get your attention before it's too late. The tiredness isn't weakness, it's resistance. Your soul is staging a rebellion, and the exhaustion is its battle cry. Here's what they don't want you to know. The system that created your exhaustion depends on you believing that you're powerless to change it. It relies on you thinking that your tiredness is a personal failure rather than a natural response to an unnatural way of living. The moment you understand that your exhaustion is not a weakness but a wisdom, the moment you recognize it as your soul's refusal to participate in its own destruction, everything changes. The rebellion begins not with action, but with a radical shift in perception. You must stop seeing your tiredness as the problem and start seeing it as the solution trying to emerge. Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming who you actually are rather than who you've been conditioned to be. But individuation isn't self-improvement, it's self-recovery. You're not trying to become better, you're trying to become real. The first act of rebellion is the most terrifying. You must stop trying to fix your tiredness and start listening to it. Your exhaustion is not a malfunction, it's information. It's your authentic self sending up flares from the depths of your psyche, saying, "I'm still here, and I refuse to die quietly." When you honor this message instead of medicating it away, something profound happens. You begin to distinguish between what energizes you and what depletes you, not based on what you think should energize you, but based on what actually does. This is where it gets dangerous for the system that created your prison. Because once you start trusting your own energy as a compass rather than external expectations, you become ungovernable. You start saying no to things that drain you, regardless of how they look on paper. You begin choosing meaning over money, authenticity over approval, truth over comfort. You become what the system fears most, a human being who knows their own worth. The ancient Stoics understood this principle through a different lens. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the importance of living according to your own nature, rather than the expectations of others. But he went further. He recognized that most human suffering comes from trying to control things outside your influence, while neglecting the one thing you can control: your own responses, your own choices, your own allegiances to what matters most. But Jung's insight was even more radical. He understood that reclaiming your authentic self isn't just personal healing. It's a form of social revolution. Every time you choose truth over performance, you give others permission to do the same. Every time you honor your own needs without apology, you model for the world what it looks like to be fully human. Every time you refuse to betray yourself for external validation, you weaken the entire system that depends on people not knowing their own worth. The rebellion deepens as you begin to reclaim your time, your energy, your attention from the forces that have colonized them. You stop consuming media that makes you feel bad about yourself. You stop participating in conversations that drain your spirit. You stop performing emotions you don't feel and start expressing emotions you've been hiding. You begin to live as if your inner life matters as much as your outer performance, because it does. Jung discovered that when you align your outer life with your inner truth, energy doesn't just return, it multiplies. You stop needing willpower to get through the day because you're finally swimming with the current of your own nature instead of against it. You stop feeling like you're dragging yourself through life because you're finally living in harmony with who you actually are. Here is the truth that will change everything. You were never supposed to figure this out. The entire architecture of modern civilization depends on you remaining unconscious to your own nature, disconnected from your own power, exhausted by your own life. Your tiredness isn't a bug in the human operating system. It's the system working exactly as designed. But what the architects of this system never anticipated was this: the very exhaustion they created to keep you compliant would eventually become the force that awakens you. Your soul-deep tiredness isn't just a symptom of disconnection. It's the chrysalis of your transformation. Every moment you've spent feeling like a stranger in your own life has been preparing you for this revelation. You are not broken, you are breaking open. Jung spent his entire career studying what he called the transcendent function. the psychological mechanism by which opposing forces within the psyche resolve into something entirely new. What he discovered will shatter your understanding of human potential. The tension between who you are and who you've been pretending to be isn't a problem to be solved. It's the creative force that births your authentic self. Think about this. Every great awakening in human history began with someone refusing to accept that their inner experience was invalid. Buddha's enlightenment came not from eliminating suffering, but from understanding its true nature. Christ's resurrection was preceded by a death that seemed like failure. Every prophet, every revolutionary, every artist who changed the world first had to refuse the world's definition of what was possible for them. The ultimate truth is this: you are not tired because you're weak. You're tired because you're strong enough to carry both your authentic self and your performed self. And you've been doing it for so long that you forgot you had a choice. But you do have a choice. You've always had a choice. And the moment you choose your authentic self over your acceptable self, everything changes, not gradually, but instantaneously. This is what Jung called the moment of individuation, when the false self dies and the true self is born. It doesn't happen through effort or achievement or optimization. It happens through surrender. Not the surrender of defeat, but the surrender of someone who finally stops fighting against their own nature and allows themselves to be who they've always been underneath the performance. This is the final revelation. Your authenticity isn't selfish. It's the greatest gift you can give to a world that has forgotten what genuine humanity looks like. Every moment you live in truth, you give others permission to do the same. Every time you honor your own needs without apology, you model for someone else that their needs matter too. Every time you choose meaning over convention, you prove that another way is possible. You came into this world as an unrepeatable miracle, a consciousness that has never existed before and will never exist again. Somewhere along the way, you were convinced to trade that miracle for mass-produced acceptability. But the miracle isn't gone. It's been waiting beneath the exhaustion, beneath the performance, beneath the armor you built to survive. The tiredness you've been carrying isn't your burden. It's your cocoon. And it's time to break free, not into another version of who you think you should be, but into the truth of who you've always been. The world doesn't need another perfect performance. It needs your authentic presence. It needs your real voice. It needs the gift that only you can give when you finally stop hiding and start living. Your exhaustion was never the problem. Your exhaustion was the pathway home to yourself. And now that you're here, now that you understand, you never have to leave again.